Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour, bienvenue à l'Université d'Ottawa. My name is Alexandra Gheciu. I am the Director of Center for International Policy Studies and a professor at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs here at our university. And it is my privilege and great pleasure to welcome all of you to today's conference, which is on a topic that is, I'm sure you will agree with me, one of the most intensely debated and important topics in contemporary international relations, and that is the question of security options that are available in our troubled world. The event, as you know, is co-sponsored with the Canadian Pugwash Group, and I would like to take a moment to thank them for their wonderful partnership, for their friendship over many years, for their impressive contributions to international security. And in fact, as I look at them, I'm thinking we're really just inviting back old friends. Over the years, we have organized many events together, and it has been a pure joy for me to get to know them, to work with them. They are truly fantastic people as individuals, as scholars, as civil society representatives. We all owe them a huge debt of gratitude for their impressive work nationally and internationally. I would also like to say a special word of thanks to Paul Meyer, who's seated there, he is based at the Simon Fraser University as a professor and international security fellow, but really he has been the vital actor in putting together this conference. We wouldn't be here without his amazing hard work. So Paul, thank you so much. You have been a wonderful friend to CIPS for this event, for many others, and I am incredibly grateful to you for all the hard work, for your friendship, for your partnership and amazing contributions, scholarly and as a practitioner over many decades. So thank you so much, Paul. Please, if you could just stand up so that everyone can see you, and we owe you so much. Thank you. Now, as I was preparing for this event, I took a moment to cast my mind back to last year's conference. And I remember the sense of anxiety, the concern expressed by so many participants about the state of international security, or rather, I should say, insecurity. At that time, we also expressed hope that by the time we meet again, because we knew we would meet again this year, the international security landscape would be perhaps a little bit better, a little bit less threatening. Alas, this was not to be. As we meet today, we cannot forget that we are meeting in truly dangerous times, with the war in Ukraine continuing with no end in sight, the multi-layered, complicated, heartbreaking conflict in the Middle East, the growing challenges associated with new technologies and AI, to mention but a few international security risks and challenges. And of course, as we reflect on what might come in a couple of weeks with the US elections, I think many would say that depending on the outcome of those elections, the international security and political landscape could become even more complicated. Okay, now that I have given you the bad news, let me give you the good news, specifically about this event, because we truly have an exceptional set of speakers and moderators who have agreed to come together and shed light on many of the security challenges that we face today. I would like to thank all of them for accepting our invitation. I know everyone is incredibly busy, so I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for accepting our invitation. I look forward to your contributions. I know I will learn a lot from you, as I always do, and I hope everyone will enjoy the conversation and take advantage of the Q&A sessions to really become engaged. We very much look forward to everyone's comments and questions, so please don't be shy. Now, in a moment, I will invite my friend, Cesar Jaramillo, who is the, Cesar doesn't need an introduction here. He is almost a family member, but I will simply say he is the executive director at Project Plowshares, and a globally known scholar specializing in international security with special focus on nuclear disarmament, the protection of civilians and armed conflict, the emerging military technologies and conventional weapons controls, to mention but a few. Before I invite Cesar to take the floor and say a few words of introduction and give you a preview of today's event, I hope you will allow me, on behalf of CIPS and our university, to give voice to the indigenous affirmation. We pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call this city home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. Thank you so much. With that, let me just, as a small logistical note, mention that we now have coffee available, and please don't be shy, help yourselves. And with that, I will invite my friend Cesar, who is, as I said, almost a family member. Cesar, I hope you don't mind, we have adopted you at CIPS. Welcome back. Once again, thank you all so much for being here today on this beautiful day. We have much to learn, much to discuss. I wish everyone a wonderful conference. Cesar, please take it away.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Alexandra. And there's a very simple reason we keep coming back. It's because you personally and your colleagues and CIPS as an institution are such wonderful hosts. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the Canadian Pugwash Group. Thank you to Paul, who's carried so much of the burden in the organization of this conference. All well done, as usual, as we can expect from Paul. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to all of you for being here. So this morning I went to 3 websites: the New York Times, CBC News, and CNN.com. And on my phone, and finding page, looking for a specific word, I looked for the word Sudan to see if there was anything about Sudan in the New York Times or CNN or CBC News. Want to take a guess? Zero, zip, nada. Not a single reference. Now, since April of last year, only April of last year, according to some of the highest estimates, mind you, as many as 150,000 civilians have been killed in Sudan. That's more or less the population of Waterloo, where I live, the full population, every single one. 150,000 people have been killed. And agencies now are warning that, that Ethiopia, the famine in Ethiopia, that some of you might remember, that was really bad, that it's going to pale in comparison to the famine that is imminent in Sudan. They're killing each other like in a scary passion and pace and brutality. Doesn't make that barely makes the headlines. I mean, unless you're a policy specialist, Joe on the street probably don't even know that there's such a killing massacre happening there. So that's very troubling. And the international community, all the funding requests have not been met, not nearly. And the international community, certainly the states that could help, are not stepping up. And the refugee flow, which is already super dire, is going to Chad, one of the poorest countries in the world. So, that's a pretty big picture. Speaking of a troubled world, as indicated in the name of the conference. In Gaza, more than 2% of the population has been killed. More than 2% of the whole population. If that was in Canada, that would be more than 800,000 people. Like, it's very likely we would all know somebody or be dead ourselves. More than 800,000 people. In the US, it'd be more than 6.5 million killed. International humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions that we hold sacred, supposedly, that were thought to be one victory, settled matters. This is what you don't do in war. It's being trampled. I'm not talking about, rare instances of a violation here or there. It's being trampled, violated consistently, persistently, shamelessly, shamefully. And we know because it's better documented than ever. Has been violated by the terrorists that we know to be terrorists. And it's been violated by states who, despite their barbarism, claim to be on the side of civilization. And we're all watching crumble. So I think that is very troubling. It's troubling for the West, who's watching with silence or timidity or complicity as this, very sacred, very hard-won regime of norms and laws about what is acceptable in times of conflict is being crumbling before our eyes, being complicit, arming the aggressors. So I think that's very troubling. So going back to the theme of a troubled world. And, I think the risk in Ukraine, with which my friend Alexandra mentioned, is not abating anytime soon. There's a real risk. Yesterday, we held a conference, high-level conference, speaking specifically about the risk of nuclear weapons. And we framed it as, and I think there's general widespread understanding that this is the case, as unprecedented. It has never been higher. Even at the height of the Cold War, it has not been higher. There's a real chance that there might be a nuclear detonation that could lead up to eventually a major thermonuclear warfare. And I always like to say I'm not an alarmist by inclination. I don't like to hype, for effect. But there's a real risk, looking at the factors, looking at the actions, looking at the trends, looking at the logical progression of where this may go. It's like, okay, it's in the realm of the really actually possible. It's not a guarantee. We hope we don't get there, but it's possible. And if it is an existential question, as in fact it is, okay, what are we doing to stop it? And we're going to see some of that and talk a little bit about that, when we talk about nuclear nightmares and what can we do as an international community to get back from the brink, from the precipice, and you run out of adjectives to describe how close we are really to a catastrophic scenario related to nuclear weapons. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence today, and more broadly, technology, military technology, technologies that are marvelous in some senses. I was talking in the walk here, on the walk to my good friend, the good Dr. Richard, about his Tesla, Tessie, I think you called it, her. He was doing hardly any of the driving. I was marveled. I've been like in a Tesla twice, ever. And and the applications of these new technologies are marvelous, and they're going to revolutionize medicine, and they already are, and they may help us crack some of these challenges that we're going to be looking at today because of their sheer complexity. They can help us, simplify, manage, craft ideas, strategies, but also as soon as they're being developed, they're being integrated into military systems. They are. Not as a future scenario. These are military systems, short of full autonomy, but just advanced unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, eventually 3D printing technologies. The future of warfare is not the future of warfare, it's the present of warfare. And they're being tested right now, today, in Gaza and Ukraine and elsewhere. And it will continue to be developed, just like artificial intelligence as a field is being developed for good purposes, like getting our friend here safely, but also for military purposes. And what are the long-term implications of that? And my friend Branca, who's somewhere here, knows this very well, that these are systems that it's not science fiction to say that we'll be able soon to make critical decisions of life and death without human intervention. Target selection and deployment of force, autonomously. That's a scary future. We're going to be talking about the future of peace operations and therefore the present. Understand the presence, the challenges. I imagine we're going to tackle questions about where criticisms should be directed. Is it the United Nations itself, or are these failings of its member states? How are peace operations going to adapt to a changing conflict environment, multifaceted, blurry? How they're going to use some of these new technologies that are so scary from a military perspective, but how can they be harnessed for peacekeeping and for good purposes? We're going to be talking about space security, and despite the physical distance from us, despite it may be seeming detached from our reality, It's a strategic domain for military purposes, not to mention social purposes and economic benefits. And make no mistake, despite the distance, things that happen in outer space have geopolitical implications right here on Earth. And of course, much like artificial intelligence and new technologies are being used right now in Ukraine and Gaza and elsewhere, so are space-based capabilities. So what is the future of that conversation? And what efforts and how successful can they be to really craft a normative regime for outer space so it doesn't get out of hand? And we're on the cusp. We're going to be talking about the arms trade. Before 2014, the arms trade was pretty much a free-for-all. When we were advocating for the adoption of an international arms trade treaty, there was something that was used as a slogan, but was actually, there was some truth to it, and it was that there were more regulations for the trade in bananas than for the trade in guns, and more standards and better standards by weight, shape, country of origin. And then in 2014, the international community came together, and finally a regime that would ensure that there would be some risk assessment, some level of predictability. And at its most basic, it was, you don't sell weapons when you know there's a good chance that they're going to be misused. So the theory was great. But you look back a decade later, and we just had the 10th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty, and the practice has not met the promise. Arming bad guy after bad guy, selling weapons to a human rights pariah like Mohammed bin Salman. He's been beheading left and right people, oppressing women, pummeling Yemen, selling weapons to someone like Erdogan from Turkey, who cannot be trusted with Canadian weapons because we know he has illegally diverted them to Libya or to exacerbate the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, to war criminals like Benjamin Netanyahu, despite everything we know. These are weapons flows, and when human rights are being pitted against humanitarian concerns, but also against the legal obligations of the Arms Trade Treaty and similar regimes, they come out losing. It's to follow the money. That's the stark reality, and there has been an erosion in the credibility of the regime itself. For good reason, because the states that have the best, the loftiest rhetoric about promotion and protection of human rights are the same ones that are selling these weapons to these bad actors. We're going to be talking about, finally, re-energizing Canada's security diplomacy. And this is very important to us in the Canadian Pugwash Group. In fact, it's in our name. It's a Canadian Pugwash Group, but also for Project Plowshares and also, I'm sure, for all of you right here. And we're here in Ottawa, the University of Ottawa. So we always like to bring it back to Canada, okay? And the fundamental question of what's Canada going to do? What is Canada doing? Are we doing the best we can? And when I've met with my friends at Foreign Affairs, at Global Affairs Canada, I've said, we may have some disagreements on some issues, but I trust and assume, and I think that is the case here, that despite our different views, we all want Canada to be a force for good in the world. So that can be like a basic starting point for our conversations, and then we can fiddle with the details. So, and I think that's the purpose of that last session as well, to bring it back together what Canada has to. Are there opportunities that are being missed? Are there better ways of engaging with the world? So we have a fabulous conference ahead of us. We have exceptional speakers, and let's get to it. Thank you very much.